If rock music was a black cat. Good day, audio listeners. My name is Fago, and welcome back to an album review. Today's subject, Mazzy Star, So Tonight That I Might See. Mazzy Star. I remember the first time I heard about these guys, and when I heard the word Mazzy, I was really curious because what kind of name is Mazzy? Now, Mazzy Star is probably the most unique rock band of the 90s because they take elements of dream pop and combine it with alternative rock. They fall into the unique group of rock bands that existed around that time. If you were around in the 90s, you would probably know one of their songs called Fade Into You, which happens to be on this record. The song showed what their unique talents are, which is combining dark elements with very beautiful guitars and vocal melodies. Mazzy Star has to be one of the few bands out there that is able to make the words dark and beautiful come together so well. And prior to the release of this record, they had their 1990 debut album called She Hangs Brightly. She Hangs Brightly was a lot more poppy compared to their other records that would be released in the future. It was a stepping stone for Mazzy Star to see success. One thing that they used a lot on this record was distortion on the guitars, and while I do think there were times where it worked, there were times where it didn't. But one thing that it did show was Hope Sandoval's amazingly beautiful vocals, along with Keith Mitchell's drums. Keith Mitchell's a very simple drummer. He's kind of like a Ringo Starr, but in the 90s instead. And fun fact about this album was one of Kurt Cobain's favorite albums prior to his death. So now we're going into 1993, which takes us to So Tonight That I Might See. And of course, we have to mention their biggest hit, Fade Into You. Fade Into You is one of those songs that are very simple but yet so beautiful because there's only 3 chords used in the entire song. But David Roback's electric guitar sliding combining with Hope Sandoval's reverb and atmospheric vocals make this one of the most beautiful love songs of the 90s. The song is about loving someone so much that you become them and less of yourself. You lose your identity. And Mazzy Star is the first band to use a tambourine for a lot of snare hits and even sometimes for rhythms. And it's not like they use it on one song. They consistently use it throughout the entire album. And after the first chorus of the song, it just stays in there the whole time on the one and the end. And it's very catchy. It kind of adds more to the percussion section of this song. Now, one thing you're going to see on this record is that it takes 2 different routes. There's either the distortion guitars or the simple acoustic guitars. Now, immediately after Fade Into You, we have the song Bells Ring, which takes us back to the distortion that Mazzy Star had on She Hangs Brightly. And immediately, the distortion on the guitars is very overwhelming. It sounds like something straight out of GarageBand. I do personally feel like that a softer guitar would have probably been better, especially considering the fact that the guitar solo is nowhere near as distorted on this song as the rhythm. I'm going to give credit to Hope Sandoval. She is very consistent on the record. Her vocals are very dark, but also atmospheric, like I said in the beginning. I also appreciate that Hope Sandoval even mumbles quite a bit because she shows that kind of emotion where she's kind of lost herself a bit. And for some reason, whoever decided to play the tambourine on this song decided to crank it up because it's all 16th notes and it's honestly annoying. And the song's tempo even increases at the very end, which also doesn't really match well with the kind of mood that you would expect, especially after a song like Fade Into You. Now let's talk about 5-string Serenade, because now Mazzy Star takes the soft route again. It's very similar to Fade Into You. It's literally just a guitar and vocals, honestly. The song is very simple. I think it's only led by guitar and vocals. There's no bass, there's no drums, there's no anything but that. There's a little bit of strings in the chorus, which I think adds some space. And I would sometimes even argue that the performances on 5-string Serenade are better than Fade Into You. While Hope Sandoval sounds depressed in Fade Into You, she's emoting a little bit more in 5-string Serenade. And it's keeping that dark theme going. While the song isn't as good, it's still pretty solid. Now, if you want to talk about dark, then you have to mention Mary of Silence because what the heck? This song is the epitome of eerie. It is literally a song that you would hear in an abandoned building. Speaking of abandoned buildings, it might as well just be a backroom song because Hope goes from singing to sounding like a possessed robot. And one time I heard this song at night and it made me terrified because I could just imagine being watched from my car. And there's even an eerie type of reverb on the drums that makes the song very uncomfortable. The guitars are also very overwhelmingly overdone, and I can somewhat appreciate the approach that Mazzy Star tried with this song, but in my opinion, this is a song that you would honestly scare kids with. Like I said, there's no catchy tune. Hope Sandoval sounds like a robot on this song. It's very skippable in my opinion. And unfortunately, Mary of Silence is not alone in this eerie, tense vibe that we get. the song Wasted kind of keeps that going. Because instead of Hope Sandoval really taking the tense approach, it's the guitars now. And at the beginning, there's a lot of feedback happening, especially in the beginning where the guitar is just that's it. Now imagine that with a ton of reverb and a little bit of feedback. The feedback personally annoys me. Yes, it was 1993, and 33 years ago, we might have not have had the mixing inserts we do nowadays, but was there really no attempt to try to control that? Thankfully, this song is a big upgrade, and also, Hope Sandoval does not sound like a robot on this song either. So now, we're gonna ditch the tense vibe that we get from this album and go into the song Blue Light. Sometimes in their discography, Mazzy Star would have their songs led by a small pad, and this is one of them. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I like the pad a lot. It's a good intro into the riff. The guitar riff is easily one of my favorite riffs in alternative rock history because it's so atmospheric. And remember the padding that I mentioned? It adds to that. And Hope Sandoval takes the same approach as she used in To Fade Into You. And also what I do like is that the song isn't depressing. It's Hope Sandoval talking about what she saw in a dream, how she mentions seeing a ship. The guitar solo is amazing. It's so beautiful. It's so well driven. And it's honestly an approach that Mazzy Star should have done for this whole record. Now, I did mention that sometimes I cannot like the eerie, intense vibe from this record, but there are times where they can nail it. And Into Dust is definitely one of those songs. Into Dust takes the electronic riff from Blue Light, but it's an acoustic riff that's led the entire time. And Hope Sandoval has been asked many times, why is your content so dark? And she says, life is dark. She acknowledges rock bottoms in life, and she uses that towards music. Now, I'm sure we've heard of many bands that decide to do that, but what band takes an approach like this that makes it dreamy, but also rocky at the same time? Into Dust is the most acoustic song on this record. Outside of the continuous riff that carries on throughout the entire song, there's a tiny bit of strings and a tiny bit of padding. The reverb dynamics are amazing. I do love that Hope Sandoval also matches that dynamic with the reverb. Another absolute banger on this album, 100%. But I do hate to be negative towards a record when I review it. Because now we're going to talk about the title track, So Tonight That I Might See. Is this even a song? Well, obviously it is a song, but it's a song that just doesn't really work because Hope Sandoval goes back to not singing. She's just talking. Now, it's not as eerie or scary as Mary of Silence, but it still takes the same approach. Not to mention, the electronic guitars sound like horns. If they are horns, then I'm an idiot, but still. It sounds like she's reading a poem, but she was told to once again sound dead on the inside. The instrumental is somewhat solid, but I can't really grasp that Hope Sandoval is not singing. And it's not like Hope Sandoval is a bad singer. She's a phenomenal singer, especially with the type of approach and the type of dark, beautiful, atmospheric dialogue and lyrics that she's able to use throughout Mazzy Star's entire career. The best way to summarize So Tonight That I Might See, the song, it sounds like you're sitting in a room and the power is slowly going out, like the lamp is flickering and everything like that. And continuing this bad trend, She's My Baby also adds further to the complication on this record, because for the first time, the instrumental is great, but what holds this song back is Hope herself. The production delay in Hope's vocals is bad because you hear Hope's vocals panned in the center, but then you hear the delay on the right, and only the right. I think it would have been better to have it just waving left and right occasionally, and maybe even slowly. For some reason, Mazzy Star decided to run away from their reverb with Hope's vocals and instead use delay. It would have been better if they used both, with a little bit more reverb. The song Unreflected really shows Hope's talent as a vocalist, and what stands out in this song for the first time are the drums. Keith Mitchell isn't just doing a random, normal groove. He's adding a lot of toms into it. But unfortunately, something that really throws me off is the shaker, because why is the shaker crank so loud? I really don't like that. The shaker can work, but it doesn't have to be that loud in my opinion. Now, from what it sounds like I was criticizing this album a lot more than I was praising it. But if I'm going to be honest with you, you have to acknowledge that the approach that Mazzy Star takes, along with how pretty Hope Sandoval's vocals, really kind of outweighs the bad, if I'm going to be honest with you. Because the dynamic reverb is so beautiful in a few of these songs that it makes me really appreciate what they did with this record. There's a reason why, even though Mazzy Star has only made 5 albums, they have a very strong following, especially Hope Sandoval herself. And the sad thing to me is that Mazzy Star has always been known as a one-hit wonder, which is painful to recognize because they're very talented. Fade Into You became the only single from Mazzy Star to hit the top 100. And what's very weird about Mazzy Star, and some people will confirm this, but Mazzy Star sounds like a band that has a very sad backstory. But there's nothing sad about them. They just made music, and that was it. No controversies, no drug habits, no anything. Just a band doing what they wanted to do. And honestly, you don't really get that nowadays. Nowadays, record labels force a band to do something, and the band gives way. But Mazzy Star decided to say no to that, and they made what they wanted to make, and that was it. They walked away. 1996 comes around 3 years later, and we have the album Among My Swan, which actually happens to be right above my beanie. Now, even though this album does have a few misses, the bangers outweigh the misses, if I'm going to be honest. It's a big variety of songs. There's songs that I don't really appreciate, like Mary of Silence, which is very tense. There's songs that are pretty solid, like Five String Serenade, and there's songs that are amazing, like Fade Into You, Blue Light, and Into Dust. The instrumentals and the production of reverb really do kind of save this album from being a flop. All in all, my score for this record is a 70. If you liked this review, hated it, want me to review another album, let me know down below. Until then, good night and God bless.